Natalie Warren, 34, owner of Sapphire Luxury Hotels and Elite Catering, shared a close bond with her brother James. They had navigated their parents' divorce together and built their lives side by side. When James became engaged, Natalie happily put down a $65,000 deposit for his dream wedding at her finest venue. Then, the previous week, his wedding planner called with news that shattered her heart. James and Natalie grew up in a modest neighborhood in Boston. He was only 2 years older than her, but he always took his role as big brother seriously. Natalie remembered how he would walk her to school every day, holding her hand at crosswalks and ensuring that the other children never bullied her. They shared a special sibling bond that some people never experience in their lifetime. Their childhood took a sharp turn when their parents divorced. Natalie was 12, and James was 14. The split was messy, filled with late-night arguments and slammed doors. Their father, Robert, was a workaholic accountant who rarely made time for family dinners. Their mother, Linda, felt neglected and eventually found companionship elsewhere. Neither of them realized how their separation would impact their children. After the divorce was finalized, their parents settled into a Cold War. They communicated only when absolutely necessary, using James and Natalie as messengers. "Tell your father he is late on the child support again." Or, "Ask your mother if I can pick you up an hour earlier on Sunday." James and Natalie quickly learned to rely on each other instead of their distracted parents. The financial situation at home became strained. Mom had been a stay-at-home parent and suddenly needed to find work with outdated skills. Dad moved into a small apartment and seemed more interested in his new girlfriend than paying bills on time. By the time Natalie was 16, she was working after school at a local diner. James took a job stocking shelves at the grocery store. They pooled their earnings to buy groceries when their mother was short on cash. "We only have each other," James would tell Natalie as they counted coins on their bedroom floor. "No matter what happens, I will always have your back," James promised. That promise carried them through high school and beyond. When Natalie decided to pursue hospitality management in college, James was her biggest cheerleader. He had opted to skip college and went straight into construction, working his way up from apprentice to foreman by the time he was 23. He would send Natalie a portion of his paycheck each month to help with her textbooks and living expenses. Natalie's career path was challenging but rewarding. She started as a front desk agent at a boutique hotel while finishing her degree. The manager noticed her dedication and promoted her to supervisor within a year. By age 27, she had worked her way up to director of operations at one of the most prestigious hotels in the city. That was when she took her biggest risk. With her savings and a small business loan, she purchased a struggling historic hotel that was on the verge of foreclosure. The Sapphire Grand possessed gorgeous architecture, but its management was terrible. Natalie worked 18-hour days for 2 years straight, renovating the property and rebuilding its reputation. James was there every step of the way, supporting Natalie through the long hours and countless challenges. James utilized his construction connections to help Natalie find reliable contractors at fair prices. On weekends, he would come by with his crew to handle small projects free of charge. "Consider it an investment in our future," he would say with a wink. The Sapphire Grand became profitable in its third year under Natalie's ownership. She used that success to secure funding for a second location, then a third. By the time she turned 30, she had 5 luxury hotels in her portfolio and had launched Elite Catering, a high-end food service company that specialized in weddings and corporate events. Throughout Natalie's entrepreneurial journey, James remained her rock. He celebrated each milestone and consoled her through every setback. When a pipe burst at the Sapphire Boston location, causing thousands in water damage, James drove 3 hours in the middle of the night to help supervise the emergency repairs. Their parents took notice of their success, but in different ways. Their father suddenly wanted to reconnect, inviting them to dinner at expensive restaurants and introducing them to his business associates. Their mother became oddly competitive, comparing her modest achievements to their perceived lucky breaks. Neither of them acknowledged that their children had succeeded despite their absence, not because of their support. Then Melissa Blake entered the picture. James met Melissa Blake at a charity golf tournament where Natalie's catering company was providing the lunch service. Melissa Blake was beautiful, polished, and came from old money. Her father owned a chain of car dealerships across the Northeast, and her mother was on the board of several prestigious cultural foundations. From the beginning, Natalie felt something was off about Melissa. Melissa spoke to the catering staff with a dismissive tone that made Natalie uncomfortable. When James introduced them, Melissa's smile did not reach her eyes. "Oh, you are the little sister who works in hotels. How quaint," Melissa said, looking around as if searching for someone more important to talk to. James was completely smitten with her. Within weeks, he was spending all his free time with Melissa. Melissa introduced James to her country club friends and took him to exclusive restaurants where the waitstaff treated him like an outsider. Gradually, Natalie noticed changes in her brother. He started using phrases like "the right people" and "our kind of establishment." James traded his reliable pickup truck for a luxury SUV he could barely afford. Their weekly sibling dinners became monthly occurrences, then rare. When they did get together, Melissa usually accompanied him, checking her watch and sighing loudly when their conversations drifted to childhood memories or inside jokes she could not participate in. Melissa and her mother, Eleanor, made no secret of their disdain for Natalie. At a dinner celebrating James's birthday, Eleanor asked pointed questions about Natalie's hotel business and seemed disappointed when she explained the scale of her operations. "Well, I suppose anyone can succeed in America these days," Eleanor said with a tight smile, "though there is a difference between new money and established families." Melissa nodded in agreement. "It must be exhausting working in service, all those complaints and dirty rooms," she added. She shuddered delicately. Natalie tried to explain that as the owner, she rarely cleaned rooms herself anymore, but James interrupted. "Natalie has always been a hard worker," James said, as if apologizing for her character trait. "She will probably sell the business once she settles down and starts a family." The comment stung. James knew how passionate Natalie was about her career. She had never expressed any desire to settle down or sell her companies. In that moment, Natalie realized how far he had drifted from the brother who once knew her better than anyone. Despite the growing distance, she still loved James fiercely. She told herself that his behavior was a phase, that he was just trying to fit into Melissa's world. Surely the brother who had held her hand at crosswalks was still in there somewhere. On a crisp autumn evening, James called Natalie with excitement in his voice. She said, "Yes, Nat. Melissa agreed to marry me." His happiness was contagious, and Natalie found herself genuinely thrilled for him, despite her reservations about his fiancée. "That is wonderful news, James. Tell me everything. How did you propose?" Natalie curled up on her sofa, ready to hear the romantic details. James launched into the story of his elaborate proposal at the Blake family's summer home in the Hamptons. He had arranged for a private chef, a string quartet, and thousands of rose petals scattered across the beach. "The ring is a 4-carat diamond that cost him nearly 6 months of savings." "It sounds perfect," Natalie said, ignoring the knot in her stomach. The extravagance seemed unlike the practical brother she had grown up with. "Have you set a date yet?" "Melissa wants a June wedding. Her mother says the best venues book up a year in advance, so we need to start planning immediately." He paused. "There is just one problem. The places Eleanor suggested are either already booked or way beyond our budget." Natalie could hear the stress in his voice. James made a good living as a construction manager, but the Blakes lived in a different financial stratosphere. Natalie knew he was worried about measuring up to their expectations. "What about the Sapphire Grand?" Natalie suggested. "The ballroom can hold 300 guests, and the gardens would be beautiful for a June ceremony." There was silence on the other end of the line. "I don't know, Nat. Melissa has her heart set on the Rosewood or the Peninsula." The Sapphire Grand was just rated above both in Luxury Travel magazine, Natalie pointed out. "And as the owner's brother, you would get preferential booking and significant discounts." After more hesitation, James promised to discuss it with Melissa. 3 days later, he called back. "Melissa will consider the Sapphire Grand, but she wants to see it first, and she is concerned about the catering." "Tell her Elite Catering can create any menu she desires," Natalie said, trying to keep the irritation from her voice. "We have 2 Michelin-trained chefs on staff." The tour of the Sapphire Grand was tense. Melissa and Eleanor walked through the grand ballroom with critical eyes, whispering to each other and taking notes. Natalie's hotel manager, Anthony, presented their most luxurious wedding package, while Natalie showed them the bridal suite with its panoramic city views. "The space is adequate," Eleanor conceded reluctantly. "But the color scheme is all wrong for Melissa's vision," Eleanor continued. "Would you be willing to reupholster the ballroom chairs and replace the draperies?" Natalie blinked in surprise. "We could certainly add chair covers and decorative elements to match your color palette," she offered. "Complete reupholstery of 200 chairs would be quite costly and unnecessary." Melissa pursed her lips. "Mother, perhaps we should continue looking at the Rosewood." James shot Natalie a pleading look. Natalie recognized that expression from their childhood, when James needed her to compromise to keep the peace. With a deep breath, she smiled at her future sister-in-law. "Why don't you show me your Pinterest board?" Natalie suggested. "I'm sure we can find creative solutions to transform the space into exactly what you are envisioning." That concession opened the floodgates. Over the next hour, Melissa detailed her dream wedding, which seemed to have been lifted straight from a royal ceremony. She wanted imported flowers, custom lighting installations, a champagne fountain, and a 10-tier cake. When Anthony discreetly provided a preliminary estimate, James went pale. Even with Natalie's owner's discount, the wedding would cost well over $100,000. That was when Natalie made a decision that would change everything. "As my gift to you both," she said, "I would like to cover the venue and catering deposit, $65,000 toward your special day." James's eyes widened. "Nat, that is too generous. We cannot accept that." But Melissa and Eleanor exchanged glances. "That would be lovely," Melissa said quickly. "We accept your generous offer." Even for a successful business owner like Natalie, $65,000 was a significant amount. It represented the profit from several months of operations. But Natalie told herself it was worth it to support her brother and perhaps build a bridge with her new extended family. The planning process began immediately. Melissa hired Victoria Hayes, one of the city's most exclusive wedding planners, to coordinate the details. Natalie expected to be included in the major decisions given her financial contribution and ownership of the venue, but she quickly discovered she was mistaken. Melissa scheduled tastings with Natalie's catering team without inviting her. Victoria sent emails about architectural changes to the ballroom without copying Natalie on the correspondence. When Natalie asked James about being excluded, he seemed uncomfortable. "Melissa just wants to make sure everything is perfect," James explained. "She feels there might be a conflict of interest if you are too involved since it is your business." Natalie swallowed her hurt feelings and tried to respect their process. However, the situation became increasingly difficult as Melissa and Eleanor made demanding and often unreasonable requests. They insisted that Natalie's staff remove a historic chandelier from the ballroom because it did not match Melissa's color scheme. They demanded that the kitchen create 15 different sample menus before making a selection. They scheduled appointments with her already overworked venue coordinator at odd hours, often canceling at the last minute. Through it all, Natalie maintained her professionalism. Natalie wanted this wedding to be perfect for James, even if it meant tolerating Melissa's bridezilla behavior. Her staff, loyal to her, did their best to accommodate the endless demands, though she could see the strain in their faces. "You are a saint," Anthony told Natalie after a particularly difficult meeting with Eleanor. "If she were not your future family, I would have shown her the door weeks ago." The $65,000 deposit was officially processed 6 months before the wedding date. Natalie signed the paperwork herself, specifying that it covered the venue rental, basic catering package, and hotel rooms for the wedding party. Additional costs for upgrades, special requests, and guest accommodations would be billed separately. As the wedding date approached, Natalie expected to receive her formal invitation. When the 3-month mark passed with no envelope in her mailbox, she casually mentioned it to James during one of their increasingly rare phone conversations. "Oh, the invitations went out last week," he said vaguely. "Melissa handled the guest list. I'm sure yours is on the way." Another month passed. No invitation arrived. Natalie told herself there must have been a mix-up with the mail, or that perhaps they assumed she did not need a formal invitation since she was so closely involved with the venue. Still, a sense of unease began to grow in the pit of her stomach. The first truly alarming sign came when her cousin Dana called to thank her for her invitation to James's wedding. "The invitation is gorgeous," she gushed. "That gold foil embossing must have cost a fortune. And the handwritten note from Melissa was such a nice touch." Natalie's heart sank. She had received neither an invitation nor a handwritten note. When she checked with other family members, she discovered they had all received their invitations weeks ago. That evening, she called James directly. "Is there something I should know about the wedding?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Everyone else seems to have received their invitations." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Melissa has been handling the guest list," he said finally. "I will check with her and get back to you." 3 days later, Natalie still had not heard from him. She decided to take a more direct approach and texted him. "Need to finalize my attendance details for your wedding? Should I bring a +1? What color dress would coordinate with the wedding party?" His response was vague and evasive. "Still working out some details. We'll let you know soon." Around the same time, Natalie noticed other concerning patterns. The bridal shower had apparently happened the previous weekend, but she had not been invited. Photos appeared on social media showing James, Melissa, and both families at what looked like an engagement photo shoot in the botanical gardens. Again, Natalie had not been included or even informed. During a routine check-in with her hotel staff about the wedding arrangements, Natalie learned that Melissa had requested a meeting to review the seating chart for the reception. Curious, she asked to see a copy. Her name was nowhere to be found. "There must be a mistake," Natalie told her events coordinator. "I am the groom's sister." The coordinator looked uncomfortable. Miss Blake was very specific about the seating arrangements. She personally reviewed each name multiple times. The situation came to a head when their parents organized a family dinner 1 month before the wedding. It was the first time in years that both Natalie's mother and father would be in the same room, a testament to the significance of James's marriage. The dinner was held at an upscale restaurant downtown with James, Melissa, both sets of parents, and Natalie in attendance. From the moment they sat down, the tension was palpable. Melissa kept whispering to her mother and shooting glances in Natalie's direction. When the conversation turned to wedding details, they spoke in vague terms, changing the subject whenever Natalie asked specific questions. During the main course, Eleanor made a comment that sent a chill down Natalie's spine. "It is so important to have the right atmosphere at a wedding," she said, swirling her wine glass. "The proper guests, the right connections. A wedding is not just a celebration, It is a statement about your place in society. Melissa nodded in agreement. Some people simply do not understand the social implications of a high-profile event, she added, looking directly at Natalie. Running hotels is one thing, but appreciating true elegance is quite another. Natalie's father, never particularly perceptive about social dynamics, laughed uncomfortably. Natalie understands elegance just fine. Her hotels are top-rated in the luxury category. Eleanor's smile did not reach her eyes. Yes, but there is a difference between serving the elite and being one of them. Is there not? The implication was clear. In their eyes, Natalie was the help, not a social equal. She looked at James, expecting him to defend her, but he was studying his plate intently, avoiding eye contact. Her mother, perhaps sensing her distress, attempted to change the subject. Natalie has been so generous with her contribution to the wedding. The venue looks absolutely stunning. Melissa's response was swift and cutting. Yes, the financial arrangement has been helpful, though we have had to make substantial upgrades to bring the space up to standard. Natalie felt as if she had been slapped. Her flagship hotel, the jewel of her business empire, was being described as substandard by a woman who had never worked a day in her life. The Sapphire Grand is a 5-star establishment, Natalie said evenly. We host diplomats, celebrities, and yes, society weddings on a regular basis. Of course you do, dear. Eleanor patted Natalie's hand condescendingly. And we appreciate your establishment's effort to accommodate our vision, Eleanor added. After dinner, Natalie tried to speak with James privately, but Melissa intercepted them. James, darling, we need to discuss the rehearsal dinner with Daddy, Melissa said, pulling him away. The look she gave Natalie was triumphant, almost smug. Later that week, Natalie received a disturbing message from a friend who worked at the country club where Melissa was a member. She had overheard Melissa laughing with her bridesmaids about the hotel girl who thought she was invited to the wedding. She actually thinks she will be sitting at the family table, Melissa had reportedly said, as if we would want someone like her front and center in the photos, but we need to keep her happy until the big day since she controls the venue. Another bridesmaid had asked, what about the money she contributed? $65,000 is a lot to take without including her. Melissa's response chilled Natalie. That money is already spent. What is she going to do? Ask for it back? Besides, James says she is loaded. Natalie confronted James that evening, calling him and demanding answers. Am I invited to your wedding or not? She asked bluntly. Because from what I am hearing, Melissa has other ideas. James sighed heavily. Nat, it's complicated. Melissa and her mother have very specific ideas about the guest list. They are concerned about maintaining a certain atmosphere, an atmosphere that does not include your only sister, the sister who gave you $65,000 toward this wedding. Natalie's voice cracked with emotion. You do not understand the pressure I am under, James said defensively. Melissa's family moves in important circles. This wedding could open doors for both of us. Since when do you care about important circles? Natalie demanded. What happened to the brother who used to say we only needed each other? People grow up, Natalie. They change. Maybe you should try it sometime instead of holding on to the past. His words were like daggers to her heart. Is that Melissa talking, or you? Natalie asked quietly. This conversation is not productive, he said, his voice cold. I need to go. Melissa and I have an appointment with the florist. As Natalie hung up the phone, she felt a deep sense of loss. The brother she had known and loved her entire life was slipping away, replaced by someone she barely recognized. Still, she clung to the hope that this was temporary madness, that the real James would return once the wedding stress had passed. She decided to make one last attempt to salvage their relationship. She sent James a heartfelt email reminding him of all they had been through together and expressing her hurt at being excluded from his important day. She assured him that she would continue to ensure the wedding venue and catering were perfect, regardless of her personal feelings, because that was what family did for each other. His response was brief and formal. "Thank you for your understanding. I will speak with Melissa about the guest list situation." Days passed with no further communication. The wedding was now just 1 week away, and Natalie had begun to accept that she might not be attending her own brother's ceremony, despite providing the venue and a substantial financial contribution. Then came the phone call that would change everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Natalie's phone rang, displaying an unfamiliar number. She was in the middle of a budget meeting with her executive team, but decided to answer in case it was related to the wedding. "Hello, is this Natalie Warren?" a voice inquired. A professional female voice inquired. "Yes, speaking," Natalie replied, stepping out of the conference room. "This is Victoria Hayes, the wedding planner for the Warren Blake ceremony scheduled at the Sapphire Grand next Saturday." Her tone was crisp and businesslike. "I am calling regarding your deposit payment of $65,000. Natalie's heart skipped a beat. "Yes. Is there an issue with the payment?" she asked, though she had processed it herself months ago. Perhaps there was some administrative problem. "Not exactly." Victoria hesitated. "I have been instructed by the family to inform you that your invitation to the wedding has been cancelled. However, they would like to retain the deposit you provided." The world seemed to stop. Natalie gripped the hallway wall for support. "Excuse me," she managed to stammer. Victoria cleared her throat uncomfortably. "The family has decided to revise the guest list. Your attendance is no longer required. However, they wish to keep the venue and catering arrangements as planned, utilizing the deposit you already paid." "Which family?" Natalie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Who exactly made this decision?" "Miss Blake and her mother provided the instruction." Victoria replied, "I was told that Mr. James Warren was aware of this decision." Victoria confirmed, "I was told that Mr. James Warren is aware and has agreed to the arrangement." James had agreed to uninvite her from his wedding, but keep her $65,000. Her own brother. The same brother who once gave her half his sandwich every day at school because he knew she was too shy to ask for more food. The brother who held her hand at their grandmother's funeral and promised they would always have each other. "May I ask why?" Natalie managed, fighting to keep her voice steady. Victoria paused again, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation. "I was informed that your presence might distract from the event's intended atmosphere. Miss Blake felt that the family dynamics might create tension on her special day." "Family dynamics," Natalie repeated incredulously. "I am his sister, his only sibling," Natalie stated. "Miss Blake also mentioned something about your professional connection to the venue, potentially confusing guests about your role." Victoria sounded like she was reading from a script. "She specifically mentioned concerns about you being perceived as staff rather than family, given your ownership of the establishment." The cruelty of the statement knocked the wind out of Natalie. After years of hard work building her business from nothing, her success was being used against her. She was too associated with the service industry to be worthy of attending her brother's wedding. "Did James say this?" she asked, needing to know if these were his words or Melissa's. "I have not spoken directly with Mr. Warren since my initial briefing," Victoria replied. "However, I was informed that he was fully aware and in agreement with the decision." Victoria admitted. "The instruction came from Miss Blake, but she assured me that Mr. Warren was fully aware and in agreement with the decision." Victoria confirmed that James Warren was in agreement. Natalie closed her eyes, trying to process the betrayal and the $65,000 she had contributed. They expected to keep that money while excluding her from the event. "Yes," Victoria confirmed, sounding increasingly uncomfortable. "The deposit is considered non-refundable at this point, as stated in the contract," Victoria confirmed. Miss Blake mentioned that you had presented it as a gift not contingent on your attendance. A wave of anger washed over Natalie, clearing away the shock and hurt. This was beyond inconsiderate. It was calculating and cruel. They had used her for her venue, her catering services, and her money, all while planning to exclude her from the actual celebration. Miss Warren, are you still there? Victoria inquired. Victoria asked after a long silence. Yes, Natalie said, her voice suddenly calm and clear. I want to confirm that I understand correctly. The bride and her mother have decided I am not welcome at my brother's wedding despite my significant financial contribution and the fact that the event is being held at my property, and my brother has apparently agreed to this arrangement. I am his sister, his only sibling, Natalie stated. Miss Blake also mentioned something about your professional connection to the venue, potentially confusing guests about your role. Victoria sounded like she was reading from a script. She specifically mentioned concerns about you being perceived as staff rather than family, given your ownership of the establishment. The cruelty of the statement knocked the wind out of Natalie. After years of hard work building her business from nothing, her success was being used against her. She was too associated with the service industry to be worthy of attending her brother's wedding. Did James say this? She asked, needing to know if these were his words or Melissa's. I have not spoken directly with Mr. Warren about this matter, Victoria admitted. The instruction came from Miss Blake, but she assured me that Mr. Warren was fully aware and in agreement with the decision. Natalie closed her eyes, trying to process the betrayal and the $65,000 she had contributed. They expected to keep that money while excluding her from the event. Yes, Victoria confirmed, sounding increasingly uncomfortable. The deposit is considered non-refundable at this point, as stated in the contract. Miss Blake mentioned that you had presented it as a gift not contingent on your attendance. A wave of anger washed over Natalie, clearing away the shock and hurt. This was beyond inconsiderate. It was calculating and cruel. They had used her for her venue, her catering services, and her money, all while planning to exclude her from the actual celebration. Miss Warren, are you still there? Victoria asked after a long silence. Yes, Natalie said, her voice suddenly calm and clear. I want to confirm that I understand correctly. The bride and her mother have decided I am not welcome at my brother's wedding despite my significant financial contribution and the fact that the event is being held at my property, and my brother has apparently agreed to this arrangement. That is my understanding. Yes, Victoria replied cautiously. Natalie took a deep breath. Victoria, I appreciate your calling me directly. I am guessing you did not know that I am the owner of the Sapphire Grand and Elite Catering. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. No, I was not aware of that connection. Miss Blake introduced you only as Mr. Warren's sister, who had contributed to the wedding fund. I see, Natalie said, a plan already forming in her mind. In that case, I have a message I would like you to deliver to Miss Blake and my brother. Of course, Victoria replied, her professional demeanor slipping as she realized the precarious position she was in. Please tell them that I said to cancel the entire wedding, Victoria gasped. But Miss Warren, you cannot. You are not the bride or groom. You do not have the authority to cancel the event. No, Natalie agreed, but I own the venue, the catering company, and the hotel chain they booked for out-of-town guests. And according to Section 12 of the contract they signed, I reserve the right to cancel any event that violates our company's core values, which include respect and integrity. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. But the deposits, the guests, everything is arranged, Victoria stammered. Yes, it is unfortunate timing, Natalie said coolly. Please inform Miss Blake and my brother that unless I receive a formal apology and invitation to the wedding by 5 p.m. today, The Sapphire Grand will no longer be available for their event. All deposits will be forfeited as per the cancellation policy they agreed to, Natalie added. This is highly irregular, Victoria protested. I have never encountered such a situation in my career. Neither have I, Natalie admitted. But then, I have never been uninvited from my brother's wedding while being expected to fund it. Please deliver my message promptly, Natalie instructed. She ended the call and leaned against the wall, her heart pounding. Part of her could not believe what she had just done. Another part knew it was long overdue. For too long, Natalie had allowed Melissa and her family to treat her with disrespect while she smiled and accommodated their demands. For too long, she had watched her brother transform into someone she barely recognized. The time for passivity was over. If James wanted to choose Melissa's elitist values over their lifelong bond, that was his right. But he would not do it in her venue with her money, while excluding her from the celebration. Within minutes, her phone began to ring. It was James. Natalie let it go to voicemail. Then Melissa called, then Eleanor. She ignored them all, returning to her budget meeting with a serene smile that confused her executive team. Is everything all right? Anthony asked, noticing her changed demeanor. Actually, yes, Natalie replied. I think everything is finally becoming very clear. By 4:30 that afternoon, her office, phone, cell phone, and email were flooded with messages. Victoria had apparently delivered her ultimatum, unleashing a storm of panic. The wedding was only 10 days away. Over 200 guests had confirmed their attendance. Deposits had been paid to florists, photographers, and entertainers. At precisely 4:55, there was a commotion in the hotel lobby. James had arrived with Melissa and both sets of parents in tow. It was time to face the consequences of her stand. Natalie instructed her assistant to escort the wedding party to her private conference room rather than her office. This was no longer a family matter, but a business dispute, and she wanted the setting to reflect that distinction. When she entered the room 5 minutes later, the tension was palpable. Melissa was red-faced and teary, clutching her mother's hand. Eleanor looked apoplectic, her lips pressed into a thin line. Natalie's parents appeared confused and distressed, and James, her beloved brother, looked like a stranger. His face was a mask of anger and embarrassment. "What the hell do you think you are doing?" he demanded as soon as Natalie closed the door behind her. She remained standing, hands clasped in front of her. "Enforcing the terms of our contract," she replied calmly, "and standing up for myself finally." Melissa's father, Howard Blake, stepped forward. He was a large man accustomed to intimidating others with his physical presence. "This is outrageous. We have a binding agreement. You cannot simply cancel a wedding with 10 days' notice." Natalie met his gaze steadily. "Actually, I can. Section 12 of the venue contract clearly states that the Sapphire Grand reserves the right to cancel any event that violates our ethical standards or poses a reputational risk to our establishment." "Ethical standards? What nonsense is this?" Eleanor scoffed. "Attempting to exclude the venue owner from an event while retaining her financial contribution constitutes fraud. That violates both ethical standards and potentially the law," Natalie stated. "We did not exclude you," Melissa protested, tears streaming down her face. "We simply revised the guest list." "By removing only me?" Natalie pointed out. After accepting her $65,000 contribution, Natalie's mother stepped forward, clearly confused. "Natalie, what is going on?" Natalie looked at James, giving him the opportunity to explain. "Why would you not be invited to your own brother's wedding?" He avoided her gaze, staring at the carpet. "Perhaps James or Melissa would like to explain their reasoning," Natalie suggested after the silence stretched uncomfortably. "This is a misunderstanding," James finally said, his voice lacking conviction. "Victoria must have confused the instructions." Victoria Hayes, who had been quietly observing from the corner of the room, straightened her spine. I followed Miss Blake's instructions exactly as they were given to me. I was told to inform Miss Warren that her invitation had been rescinded, but that the deposit would be retained. Eleanor waved her hand dismissively. This is ridiculous, Eleanor stated. So, there was a miscommunication about the guest list. It happens with large events. That is no reason to threaten the entire wedding, Eleanor insisted. This was not a miscommunication, Natalie said firmly. This was a deliberate decision to exclude me while keeping my money. You offered that money as a gift, Melissa snapped, dropping all pretense of civility. Gifts do not come with conditions. Actually, they often do, Natalie countered, especially when the gift is a business transaction with a signed contract. Howard Blake pulled out his cell phone. This is absurd. I am calling our attorney right now. We will sue you for breach of contract. You are welcome to do that, Natalie replied, but the contract is quite clear about my right to cancel under these circumstances. Additionally, I have documentary evidence of the bride's intent to defraud me by accepting my financial contribution while planning to exclude me from the event. That is a serious accusation, Howard growled. Yes, it is, Natalie agreed. Almost as serious as telling your daughter it is acceptable to take $65,000 from someone and then ban them from the event they funded. Natalie's father, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. James, is this true? Did you agree to exclude your sister from your wedding? James looked trapped, his eyes darting between Melissa and Natalie. It's complicated, he muttered. It is actually quite simple, Natalie said, feeling a strange calm despite the chaos. Either I am welcome at my brother's wedding as a full and respected family member, or there will be no wedding at the Sapphire Grand. Melissa burst into fresh tears. You cannot do this. Everything is arranged. Our guests are arriving from Europe next week. The custom gown, the flowers, the band that required a 6-month deposit. I understand it is inconvenient, Natalie acknowledged, but so is discovering that your only sibling has decided you are not good enough to attend his wedding despite your generous contribution. Eleanor turned to James. This is ridiculous. Call her bluff. We can find another venue. Natalie smiled thinly. With 10 days' notice in the height of wedding season, that seems unlikely, but you are welcome to try. Of course, you would forfeit the deposit here, and most other venues will require full payment up front for such a last-minute booking. The color drained from Melissa's face as she realized the impossibility of the situation. Daddy, do something. Howard Blake looked thoughtful. Perhaps we can come to some arrangement. What exactly do you want, Miss Warren? Howard Blake inquired. Respect, Natalie said simply. A sincere apology and acknowledgement that what you planned was wrong, and a guarantee that I will be treated as family that I am at this event. This is extortion, Eleanor hissed. No, Natalie corrected her. This is a boundary. I have spent months accommodating every demand, absorbing every slight, and financing a significant portion of this wedding. In return, I have been treated with contempt and ultimately excluded entirely. That ends today. Natalie's mother moved to stand beside her, surprising everyone, including herself. I agree with Natalie. What you were planning is shameful, James. I raised you better than this. James finally looked up, his expression a mix of shame and defiance. You do not understand the pressure I have been under. I understand perfectly, Natalie replied. You have been so desperate to impress Melissa and her family that you were willing to betray the sister who has always been there for you. The sister who helped put you through trade school, who celebrated every success and supported you through every failure. Something in Natalie's words seemed to penetrate the fog James had been living in. For the first time in months, Natalie saw a glimmer of the real James in his eyes. I never wanted to hurt you, Nat, he said quietly. Yet you were willing to ban me from your wedding while keeping my money, Natalie pointed out. How did you think that would make me feel? I thought. He hesitated. I thought you would understand that sometimes sacrifices have to be made for the bigger picture. And I was the sacrifice, he said. I was the sacrifice? Natalie asked, her voice breaking slightly despite her resolve to remain composed. James had no answer for that. Howard Blake cleared his throat. Let us be practical about this, Miss Warren. If we agree to include you in the wedding as requested, will you allow the event to proceed as planned? That depends, Natalie said, turning to face James directly. Is that what you want, James? Am I just an obligation to be tolerated, or do you actually want your only sister at your wedding? The room fell silent as everyone waited for James's response. This was the moment of truth. Not just for the wedding, but for their relationship going forward. James looked at Melissa, then at Natalie, then down at his hands. I want you there, Nat, he said finally. I always did. I just got caught up in everything. The planning, the expectations, the pressure to make everything perfect. Perfect for whom? Natalie asked softly. He had no answer for that either. Melissa stomped her foot in frustration. This is my wedding. I should decide who attends. It is our wedding, James corrected her, seeming to find his voice at last. And Natalie is my sister. She should be there. She deserves to be there. The look Melissa gave him was venomous. After this stunt, you still want her there? She just threatened to ruin our entire wedding. After you tried to exclude her while keeping her money, James countered, standing a little straighter. Think about that, Melissa. How would you feel if someone did that to you? For perhaps the first time since Natalie had met her, Melissa seemed genuinely speechless. Here is what is going to happen, Natalie said, addressing the entire room. I will allow the wedding to proceed as planned, with the following conditions. First, I will receive a formal written apology from the bride and groom for the attempt to exclude me. Second, I will be treated with the respect due to a family member and business owner throughout all wedding events. Third, my $65,000 contribution will be acknowledged in the wedding program as a gift from a loving sister, not simply as a venue discount. Howard Blake nodded thoughtfully. Those terms seem reasonable given the circumstances. Father, Melissa protested. Enough, Melissa, Howard said firmly. Miss Warren has us over a barrel, and you know it. More importantly, she is right. What you and your mother planned was inappropriate and potentially illegal. We are fortunate she is willing to work with us at all. Eleanor looked as if she had swallowed something sour, but remained silent. Natalie's parents exchanged glances, clearly processing the family drama they had walked into. Do we have an agreement? Natalie asked, looking directly at James. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. Yes, he said. And Nat, I am sorry. I should never have let things get this far. It was a start, but Natalie knew they had a long way to go to rebuild the trust that had been broken. Still, for the first time in months, she felt like she might eventually get her brother back. Then the wedding will proceed as scheduled, Natalie said, opening the conference room door to signal that their meeting was concluded. Victoria will coordinate with my staff on the final details. As the group filed out, James lingered behind. When they were alone, James turned to Natalie with tears in his eyes. I really am sorry, Nat. I do not know who I've become these past few months. Neither do I, she said honestly. But I hope you figure it out before you say, I do. Marriage is hard enough when you are being true to yourself. He nodded slowly, seeming to really hear her for the first time in months. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I deserved it. That is what family does, Natalie replied. The real kind, not the kind that only values status and appearances. James nodded, then turned to rejoin his waiting fiancé. Natalie wondered whether the wedding would actually take place, and if it did, what kind of marriage would follow. Only time would tell. The days leading up to the wedding were tense but productive. True to her word, Natalie ensured that every detail of the venue and catering was perfect. Natalie's staff, who had heard rumors of the confrontation, worked with renewed enthusiasm, proud that she had stood up for herself. Victoria Hayes proved to be surprisingly diplomatic once the initial shock had worn off. She had clearly gained a new respect for Natalie after learning about her ownership of the Sapphire properties and witnessing her handling of the situation. "I must apologize for my part in this mess," she told Natalie as they reviewed the final seating chart. "Had I known who you were from the beginning, I would have never agreed to make that call." "You were doing your job based on the information you had," Natalie assured her. "Though in the future, you might want to question clients who ask you to exclude immediate family members while keeping their money." Victoria winced. Lesson learned. Believe me. As promised, Natalie received a formal written apology from James and Melissa. James's portion seemed heartfelt and genuinely remorseful. Melissa's contribution was stiff and clearly coached by her father's legal team, but it met the technical requirements of their agreement. The rehearsal dinner, held 2 nights before the wedding, was Natalie's first real test. As she entered the restaurant's private dining room, conversations hushed and all eyes turned to her. She held her head high, wearing a designer dress that struck the perfect balance between elegant and confident. James immediately came to greet her, kissing her cheek and leading her to a seat of honor near the head of the table. Melissa remained seated, offering only a tight smile that did not reach her eyes. Eleanor Blake made a point of avoiding Natalie entirely, while Howard surprised her by approaching with an unexpected olive branch. "Miss Warren," he said, extending his hand, "I want to personally apologize for the unpleasantness earlier this week. In business, I have always valued directness and integrity. You displayed both, and I respect that." Natalie accepted his handshake. "Thank you, Mr. Blake. I appreciate your understanding." "Howard, please," he insisted. "We are about to be family, after all." Throughout the evening, Natalie noticed James watching Melissa with an increasingly thoughtful expression. She was in full bride mode, accepting compliments and directing conversations with practiced charm. But whenever the attention was elsewhere, her smile would slip, and she would whisper sharp instructions to the waitstaff or shoot irritated glances at guests who failed to follow her conversational lead. After dinner, James found Natalie on the restaurant's terrace, where she had stepped out for a moment of peace. "You look beautiful tonight, Nat," he said, joining her at the railing. "Thank you. It is a lovely evening." He nodded, staring out at the city lights. "Do you remember when we used to sit on the fire escape of Mom's apartment and plan our futures?" Natalie smiled at the memory. "You were going to build skyscrapers, and I was going to own a small bed and breakfast with a garden." "Life turned out differently than we expected," he mused. "Better in some ways," Natalie said, "though I still might get that garden someday." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the first they had shared in months. "I keep thinking about what you said," James finally admitted, "about being true to myself." Natalie waited, giving him space to continue. "I don't know if I am," he said softly. "Everything happened so fast with Melissa. She was beautiful, sophisticated, connected. Dating her felt like being admitted to an exclusive club I never knew existed." "And now?" Natalie prompted gently. He sighed heavily. "Now I am standing on a terrace with my sister, hiding from my own rehearsal dinner, wondering if I am making the biggest mistake of my life." Natalie's heart ached for him, but she knew this was his decision to make. "Cold feet are normal before a wedding," she said. "This feels like more than cold feet," he confessed. "The way she and her mother treated you, it opened my eyes to things I have been ignoring. The way she speaks to servers when she thinks no one important is watching. The comments she makes about my friends from the construction company. The constant pressure to improve myself by changing everything about who I am. Those are valid concerns, Natalie acknowledged carefully. But the wedding is in 2 days, he continued, running a hand through his hair. Everything is paid for. Guests are arriving from all over. Canceling now would be a disaster. More of a disaster than a divorce in a year or 5 years or 10 years with children involved? Natalie asked softly. Before he could respond, Melissa's voice rang out from the doorway. There you are. Everyone is asking where you disappeared to. The mask slipped back into place as James turned to his fiancée with a practiced smile. Just getting some air with Natalie. We'll be right in. Melissa's eyes narrowed slightly as she looked between them. Don't be too long, she said. The Harringtons are about to leave, and they came all the way from London. After she retreated inside, James gave Natalie an apologetic look. I should go. Of course, Natalie said, touching his arm gently. But James, whatever you decide, I will support you. That is what real family does. The day of the wedding arrived with perfect June weather. The Sapphire Grand had been transformed into a floral wonderland, with white roses and orchids adorning every surface. The ballroom gleamed with candlelight and crystal, exactly as Melissa had envisioned. As a family member rather than just the venue owner, Natalie was seated in the front row for the ceremony. Eleanor Blake made her displeasure known with pointed glares, but Howard nodded respectfully when their eyes met. The music began, and the procession started. James stood at the altar, looking handsome in his tuxedo but noticeably tense. As the bridal march played and Melissa appeared at the back of the hall on her father's arm, a collective gasp rose from the guests. She was undeniably stunning in a custom gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. The ceremony proceeded according to plan, until the minister reached the pivotal question. In the brief silence that followed, James looked directly at Natalie. Their eyes locked, and she saw something shift in his expression. A clarity, a decision, a return to himself. I have something to say, he announced, his voice steady. The crowd murmured in shock. Melissa froze beside him, her bouquet trembling in her grip. James, the minister prompted uncertainly. I cannot do this, James said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Not like this. Not when I am not being true to myself or to the values my sister and I were raised with. Gasps and whispers rippled through the audience. Melissa's face contorted with rage and embarrassment. What are you doing? She hissed. James turned to face her directly. I am sorry, Melissa. You are beautiful and accomplished, and you will make someone very happy someday. But that someone is not me. I have been trying to become someone I am not to fit into your world, and in the process, I nearly lost the person who has always been there for me. He looked at Natalie again, and she saw her brother, her real brother, in his eyes once more. This wedding is canceled, he announced to the stunned crowd. I apologize for the inconvenience and thank you all for coming. What followed was chaos. Melissa collapsed into her mother's arms, wailing dramatically. Eleanor shouted about lawsuits and ruined reputations. Howard Blake surprisingly remained calm, directing his attention to managing his wife and daughter's reactions rather than threatening James. Natalie's brother walked straight to her, took her hand, and led her out of the ballroom, away from the uproar. In the quiet of her office, he finally broke down. I cannot believe I just did that, he said, half laughing, half crying. Did you see their faces? I did, Natalie confirmed, handing him a glass of water. That was quite an exit. I am going to pay for it financially and socially, he acknowledged. But the moment the minister asked that question, I knew I could not go through with it, James continued. All I could think about was how Melissa and her mother treated you, how they were willing to exclude you while taking your money, and I realized that if I married her, I would be endorsing that behavior. I would be becoming one of them. What will you do now? Natalie asked. He shrugged, looking suddenly lighter. Despite the circumstances, James said, "Go back to my apartment, return to work, start over. It will be embarrassing for a while, but at least I will be living authentically." Natalie squeezed his hand. "I am proud of you, James. That took real courage." "I learned it from my little sister," he said with a warm smile, "the hotel girl who built an empire while staying true to herself." In the following days, James faced the fallout from his decision. The Blakes demanded repayment for their portion of the wedding expenses, which he agreed to handle over time. Some of Melissa's society friends spread unkind rumors about him, but his true friends stood by his side. As for Natalie, she had her brother back, and that was worth more than any business deal or social connection. The Sapphire Grand suffered no lasting damage to its reputation. In fact, Victoria Hayes later told Natalie that her handling of the situation had earned respect in professional circles. "Everyone knows the Blakes can be difficult clients," Victoria confided. "The fact that you stood your ground while maintaining professionalism has only enhanced your standing." 1 month after the non-wedding, James and Natalie resumed their tradition of Sunday brunches, something they had not done since Melissa entered the picture. As they shared pancakes and coffee, James looked more like himself than he had in years. "I got a call from Eleanor Blake yesterday," he mentioned casually. "She wanted to let me know that Melissa is dating a hedge fund manager now. Apparently they met at a charity gala 2 weeks after our wedding was supposed to happen." "That was fast," Natalie remarked. James laughed. "I'm not surprised. I think I was always more of an accessory than a partner to her. The successful contractor with the rugged good looks who could be molded into an acceptable society husband. And now I am dating someone new too," he admitted with a sheepish smile. "Remember Sarah from the city planning office? We always got along when I was submitting permits. She called to check on me after hearing about the wedding, and we ended up talking for hours." "Sarah is wonderful," Natalie said sincerely. "Smart, kind, and she values you for who you actually are." "That makes all the difference," James agreed. "She wants to meet you properly, by the way. I told her all about my amazing sister who saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life." "I would love that," Natalie said, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the summer sunshine streaming through the window. The wounds caused by Melissa and her family would take time to fully heal, but James and Natalie were rebuilding their bond stronger and wiser than before. Sometimes it takes nearly losing someone to realize how valuable they truly are. 6 months after the wedding that never was, Natalie sat in her office at the Sapphire Grand, reviewing the quarterly financial reports. The hotel chain was thriving, with bookings at an all-time high and a waiting list for elite catering that stretched into the next year. A knock at the door interrupted her concentration. It was Anthony, her hotel manager, with a strange expression on his face. "Melissa Blake is in the lobby," he announced. "She is asking to speak with you." Natalie set down her pen in surprise. "Melissa, did she say what this is about?" Natalie asked. "No, but she seems different," Anthony replied. "Less imperious, if you know what I mean." Curiosity got the better of Natalie. "Send her up." When Melissa entered Natalie's office, Natalie barely recognized her. Gone were the perfectly coiffed society princess with designer clothes and flawless makeup. This Melissa wore simple jeans, a sweater, and minimal cosmetics. Her hair was pulled back in a casual ponytail. "Thank you for seeing me," Melissa said, her voice lacking the entitled edge Natalie remembered. "I know this must be unexpected." "Please have a seat," Natalie offered, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. "What can I do for you?" Melissa sat down, folding her hands nervously in her lap. I came to apologize properly this time, not with some lawyer-drafted statement. Natalie raised an eyebrow but remained silent, waiting for her to continue. What I did to you was inexcusable, Melissa admitted. Trying to exclude you from James's wedding while keeping your money was not just rude, it was cruel and potentially criminal. I was so caught up in creating the perfect society wedding that I lost sight of basic human decency. What brought on this revelation? Natalie asked, genuinely curious. She sighed. After James left me at the altar, I was angry and humiliated. I blamed everyone but myself. I quickly started dating Curtis, a hedge fund manager. My mother introduced me to him, thinking I could just replace James and move on. I heard about that, Natalie acknowledged. Curtis proposed after just 6 weeks, Melissa continued. My mother was thrilled. His family has even more money than we do. But then I overheard him talking to his friends about me. Her voice cracked slightly. He said I was high maintenance but good arm candy for client meetings. He said he could train me to be the perfect corporate wife. That sounds painful, Natalie said, feeling an unexpected twinge of sympathy. It was a wake-up call, Melissa admitted. For the first time, I saw myself through someone else's eyes, and I did not like what I saw. I broke off the engagement and started therapy. My mother was furious, but my father supported my decision, surprisingly. Howard seemed to have more self-awareness than Eleanor, Natalie observed. Melissa nodded. Dad pulled me aside after the therapy announcement and told me something I will never forget. He said, Melissa, I indulged your mother's social climbing because I thought it made her happy, but it turned her into someone I barely recognize, and now it is doing the same to you. Powerful words, Natalie murmured. It has been a difficult few months of self-examination, Melissa continued. I have had to confront some ugly truths about myself and how I treated people, especially you and James. The therapist helped me see that my behavior stemmed from deep insecurity. Despite all the privilege I grew up with, I never felt good enough on my own merits. Natalie studied her closely, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. To Natalie's surprise, she found none. I don't expect forgiveness, Melissa said, meeting Natalie's gaze directly. I just wanted you to know that I recognize the harm I caused, and I am working to become a better person. I appreciate that, Natalie said carefully. Genuine apologies are rare. There is one more thing, Melissa added, reaching into her purse. This is for you. She handed Natalie an envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $65,000. Your deposit, Melissa explained. It should have been returned to you immediately after the wedding was canceled. It was wrong of me to try to keep it. Natalie stared at the check in surprise. Thank you. This is unexpected, Natalie acknowledged. It is the right thing to do, Melissa said, simply standing to leave. That is all I wanted to say. Thank you for seeing me. As Melissa turned to go, Natalie found herself asking, Have you spoken to James? She paused at the door. Number I thought about reaching out, but I decided that would be selfish. He seems happy with Sarah, from what I have heard. He deserves that happiness without me complicating things. With that, she was gone, leaving Natalie to ponder the strange encounter. People could change, Natalie realized, if they were willing to face their mistakes honestly. That evening, she met James and Sarah for dinner at her newest hotel property. They were glowing with happiness, clearly well-matched in values and temperament. Sarah was warm, intelligent, and treated the waitstaff with genuine kindness, something Natalie noticed immediately. You will never guess who came to see me today, Natalie told James over dessert. When she recounted Melissa's visit and apology, his eyes widened in disbelief. Melissa Blake admitted she was wrong and returned the money voluntarily. Are you sure it was really her, and not an imposter? I laughed. It was her, though. a very different version from the woman you almost married. James shook his head in wonder. People can surprise you. I guess, though, I am grateful every day that I did not go through with the wedding. Sarah squeezed his hand affectionately. So am I, selfishly, Natalie agreed. Natalie reflected for years. She had defined success by her business achievements, working endless hours building the Sapphire brand, sometimes at the expense of personal relationships. She took pride in being self-sufficient, never needing to ask for help. You have always been the strong one, James agreed, but strength is not about handling everything alone. Real strength is knowing when to stand up for yourself, when to set boundaries, and when to walk away from situations that diminish your worth, Natalie continued. If I had not found the courage to confront you and Melissa about the wedding exclusion, I might still be letting people take advantage of my generosity while treating me as less than. I am sorry I put you in that position, James said quietly. We both learned from it, Natalie assured him, and our relationship is stronger for having weathered that storm. In the months that followed, Natalie made changes in both her personal and professional life. She began volunteering with a mentorship program for young women entrepreneurs, sharing not just business advice, but lessons about self-worth and healthy boundaries. Natalie's experiences with Melissa and her family had shown her how many people, especially women, struggle with standing up for themselves in both personal and professional contexts. Natalie also reconnected with old friends she had neglected during her workaholic years, finding joy in relationships that had nothing to do with business advantage. James and Natalie instituted a strict no work talk policy for their Sunday brunches, focusing instead on their lives, dreams, and the simple pleasure of sibling companionship. Perhaps most surprisingly, Natalie developed a cordial relationship with Howard Blake. After Melissa's apology, Howard reached out to discuss a potential business collaboration. Over lunch, he confided that Natalie's handling of the wedding situation had earned his respect. I built my car dealership empire by recognizing talent and integrity, he told her. You demonstrated both. Eleanor and Melissa may have wealth and social connections, but you have something more valuable: character. The $65,000 check from Melissa went into a special fund Natalie created to help couples who wanted meaningful weddings without financial strain. The True Love, True Values grant provided venue and catering services at the Sapphire Grand for couples who demonstrated authentic commitment to each other and their communities. As for Natalie's brother, he and Sarah became engaged a year after the non-wedding disaster. They planned a simple ceremony in the garden of Natalie's newest hotel property, with only close friends and family in attendance. When James asked her to be his best woman, Natalie accepted with tears of joy. On the morning of his wedding, as she helped him straighten his tie, James looked at her with gratitude in his eyes. You saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life, he said. Not just by stopping the wedding with Melissa, but by reminding me of who I really am and what actually matters. That is what family does, Natalie replied, echoing the words she had spoken during their confrontation a year earlier. The real kind, not the kind that only values status and appearances. The lesson Natalie learned through that painful experience was profound. True. Self-worth comes not from what you accomplish or who accepts you, but from honoring your own values and refusing to compromise them for approval or advantage. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to say no when someone tries to diminish your worth. The path to healing began with that difficult stand, continued through rebuilding authentic connections, and led to a life richer in meaning than Natalie could have imagined. By refusing to accept disrespect, she had not only preserved her dignity, but helped others, including Melissa, confront important truths about themselves. Life offers many tests of character. The wedding that never happened became one of Natalie's, revealing strengths she did not know she possessed and values she would never again compromise. In standing up for herself, she discovered that self-respect is the foundation upon which all meaningful relationships must be built. You cannot control how others treat you, but you always have the power to decide what treatment you will accept. Sometimes saying no is the first step towards saying yes to the life you truly deserve. The story has reached its conclusion. The story has reached its conclusion.